Okay, so now we know what we are dealing with. And the next step would be that we open the Power BI interface here, and we actually put our data, which we get here, in this case an Excel file, into Power BI. So we simply go to Get Data, and in this case I have an Excel file, so I click on Excel, and then I scroll down to my folder. In this case, for me, it's my Udemy Power BI folder here. And what I'm doing is I simply refer to Excel file, so select it and press Open, and loading the data into Power BI. Okay, so just wait a little bit, and now we got the data here. And we see that in this case, I got a few tables. The tables, remember, are highlighted with this blue line up here. So that's the reason, because in our Excel file, this data is formatted as a table. But as always, we also see the sheets. So the sheets, which are those ones here, and Power BI, if I click on it, we see the preview is also trying to trying to detect the table or the data which is on the sheet. But as I said before, it's always good, a common practice, to create, at least if you're using Excel files, of course, that you create tables, because then you make sure that you get the right data and exactly data from the sheet you want. But as I said before, you could also use the whole sheet and then simply using the Power Editor, so the power of the Power Editor or Power Query Editor, and get and transform to transform the data and get rid of the columns or rows, whatever you don't need. Okay, so for now, what we do here, we simply put in a few columns we need. In this case, I want my sales data, so I'm referring to sales data, these ones in here, selecting all the tables in this case which I want. I want my sales people, I want my product data, I want my location data, and I want my customer data. So that's the data I want to import. The other tables, for now, I don't want to import those, and I do not want to import the sheets, because I don't need my data twice, right? Okay, and now what I'm doing is, instead of clicking on load, I'm clicking on edit. But as always, if you click on load, because I know that a lot of people would click on load immediately because it's highlighted in yellow, so you could always go click on edit queries here and go to the editor. So that would also be possible. But in this case, I'm clicking on edit, and now I'm waiting for my editor to open. So the first thing is that it loads the data, and now the query editor interface opens and shows me the queries, in this case the tables which were imported. And Power BI itself has already done a few applied steps here. So we can see, if I simply click on the step, I see at first it recognized the source. So that's where we get. So we get the name, we get the data type, which is a table in this case, we get the item, kind, and hidden. So these are sheets which are automatically inserted, and then Power BI itself has already done a few steps for us. For instance, cleaning this, so deleting these things, because what we actually need is the table. If I click on that, you can see a kind of preview up here. Scroll up, and you can see that's what it looks like. So this is basically the data we want to extract from this customer data, for instance, okay, from this table. And then it did some navigation here, so it extracted that, and then it changed the types, because here you can see it's ABC123. This simply means that currently it has not changed the data type, so currently it's not sure what kind of data type it is, and then it has changed the data type, and you can see that now it's ABC, which is simply refers to text or string value. Okay, so this is already done by Power BI. This is nothing we need to do in this case. However, of course, if Power BI has detected something wrong, for instance, we would say that this is a number. In this case, that's not possible, of course, because there's a letter before, but we could simply get rid of the C, and then we have a number here. We could simply refer here and click on a whole number or a decimal number. So we could simply convert this into another kind of format, so data type, if you want. Okay. So this is the queries we have, and what we could do now is I could right click here, and I could say new group. And the reason why I can do this is actually I want to put all my data into a group. So in this case, this is simply for having more a kind of structure. So in case for instance, now I used all these queries in my query editor, but so far I have not imported all of them into my Power BI interface. So actually in Power BI itself, okay? And for instance, I'd say, okay, for now I want to import a few of those tables, but I do not want to see all of them in my interface, so I could simply refer to orders. So this is basically only for structuring. It's not necessary, but if you want to have some clean structure, then I'd recommend that you create some orders, add some groups here. Okay, so folders, I want to say. So what you can do is again, click on here and say new group, and now I'm creating my group and say this group is, for instance, my or let's say data for model, I call it this one, and here you can enter a description. So if in case you want to do this, and for now I don't do this, it's not necessary. And you can see that there's a second folder which was created, which is the other queries. And what I could do now, I could simply drag the queries I want. For instance, this one simply in my folder up here. Could click on that, and then it's inside this data model folder. So this is again only for structuring if I want to do this. In this case, I want to do this because the reason is the following. As you can see here, I have 3 different tables. So sales, 2017, 16, and 15. And what I do not want is, I don't want to have 3 different tables, right? I want to have one sales table for all of my sales. So how can I do this? Well, what I'm doing is, I'm creating a reference for one of my tables. So it doesn't matter if I choose 2017, 16, or 15. And with this reference, I'm appending the other 2 queries. Okay? So what I'm doing here is simply right click on 2017 here. And what I'm doing is I'm creating a reference. So I do not duplicate it. I'm creating a reference. The reason is, if I'm creating a reference and the table itself in Excel will be changed later on. For instance, 2017 is not done yet, so the year is not over, and there will be additional sales, and we change the sales table, then also the reference gets updated. Okay, that's why I'm creating a reference here. So I'm doing this reference, creating this, and you can see it here. And what I can do now is I could rename it. 2 options, either double click on it or go here to properties on the right and change the name. So let's say this is my sales table. Okay, so click on that and you see that I've renamed it. So I have my sales table in here, and what I want to do now is I want to append the other 2 queries. So sales 2016 and sales 2015. And how can I do this? Well, I simply select my sales table, and up here under the home ribbon you find merge queries and append queries. So in this case we do not want to merge them, we want to append them, because what I want to do is I want to have my sales 2016 and my sales 2015, and I want to basically append them, so simply put them at the bottom of this table up here. So my 2017 sales, okay? And since what's important here, of course, is when we want to append something, we need to have the same structure, okay? Because here we have order ID, product ID, location ID, and so on until price. And you can see that this is the same for 2016, exactly the same, and also exactly the same for 2015. And that's the reason why we can simply append those queries and create one huge sales table for all of our 3 years, okay? So what I'm doing now is I'm going to append queries, and I'm right click here, and now I could select, do I want to append those as new table or do I want to append them? In this case, I already have created a reference here, so I simply want to append them to this query instead of creating a new query. I could do this as well, but in this case I already created a reference, so I say append queries. And now I have 2 options. So let me give this here. I have 2 tables or 3 or more tables. So in this case I have more than 2 tables, because otherwise I could only select one of them, 2016, and then I would have to do the same again and would append 2015. That's not what I want. I have the option to select more tables, so I click on 3 or more tables, and now what I can do is simply select the tables I want, 2016 and 2015. You can select both of them holding Control key, and then simply click on Add, and you can see that I'm appending now sales 2016 and sales 2015 to my sales table current, which reflects or is a reference of the sales 2017, right? So what I'm doing is simply click OK, and now I have my sales table, and I can check this simply by referring to the purchase date. If I click on that and I say sort ascending, And wait, then you can see it starts with the 1st of January 2015. So this makes at least sure that I get all my 3 years. So I got 2015, 16, and 17 appended to my sales table. And now I have one great sales table here. And what I'm doing is, because this sales table, this is what I want in my data model. So I'm referring here to this folder. So drag it up to the data model. And what I'm doing with the other 3 tables, if I select those and then right click, you can see that currently the enable load is checked. But this is something I don't want to do because at first it takes additional amount of storage space, so it makes Power BI itself more slowlier. But I do not need them. I do not need to load them, and I don't want to see them in my Power BI interface later on, because all I need is the sales table, because it contains all the 3 sales tables here, right? So I can right click and could disable the load. So I deselect the checked load, and I do the same for the 2016, disable the load, and I do the same for 2015, disable the load. And you can see that now it's grayed out, so all these 3 tables are grayed out, which simply means that they are not loaded into our data model, which simply saves some storage space, and also we do not see them later on when we want to create report or create some visuals. We could not drag data from these 2 tables because they will not be shown. Okay, only the sales table, but this is enough because it contains all the data of these 3 columns, these 3 tables. Okay, and the other tables I want to use is, of course, the sales people here, and I also want the product data. So I'm simply drag and dropping all the tables which I need, which I want to use in my model, up to my data model, and the others I kept them here. Okay, the other queries, and simply okay. So now I got my data here, and now let's, in addition to that, do some transformation steps. But we will do this in the next video because this video is already pretty long. So hopefully I see you there. Till then.